Ray Bard, founder and editor-in-chief of today's Caregiver magazine and Caregiver.com, host of the 286 Fearless Caregiver conferences held across the nation to date, author of the new book about COVID-19 caregiving, You Are Not Alone, and your host for this video series, COVID-19 Caregiving Conversations. Our goal, as with all we do, is to help family caregivers learn about the people, support, and services you need to best care for your loved ones and for yourself. One of my favorite parts of what we do is when we spend a day with our fellow family caregivers at the Fearless Caregiver conferences. Of course, this is not presently possible due to COVID-19, so we hope to be able to continue this interaction with you virtually until we can once again spend the day together.
We have been taught to be compliant, obedient, walk in, let them look at us, tell us what's wrong with us, walk out. We can't interact with the healthcare industry like that anymore. We need to be an active participant. We need to walk in with a set of questions. We need to walk out with a set of notes. We need to understand why we're taking a medication. We need to know more than just what our numbers are. You need to know what is your cholesterol and what is your high blood pressure number mean? What do you need to do? What lifestyle changes and what prescriptions might you go on to bring you back into a normal range?
What Caregiver Media Group has done in forming this and the conferences they put on gives people like you, me, a chance to bond with other people who are going through similar circumstances, whether it be the same disease we're fighting or the same emotions that we are dealing with. And therefore, I want to recognize the significance of them and the significance of you being here, because we do have somewhere to go now. We do have somewhere to turn whenever we don't have the answers, and it's nice to know that, hey, someone else has already been through this, and guess what? They survived.
The idea of the caregiver, someone who is so willing to give most of themselves over to somebody else so that somebody else has some quality of life, is a pretty amazing thing. It is not every bear can do that. It's a pretty rare, wonderful thing. Not everybody that lives on our planet, most of whom are asleep, have that kind of energy, have that kind of will, have that kind of strength, have that kind of generosity of spirit that you have. It's pretty amazing.
This lady is a caregiver, and she takes care of a lady who's 100 years old. She's 93. But it gives her something to do. Every day, three, four times a week, she goes by because she now has a purpose at 93. We're the only country in the world who has no respect for our senior citizen, our precious citizen. So she has something to do. I got to go. I got to take care of my. I have a purpose. I have a reason for being. That I'm 93 does not mean that I have to go sit in a corner and just wait to die.
Thank you very much for joining us. This was spectacular. Having a caregiver in a room of caregivers is lovely. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I thank you for thanking me, but I'm not doing it for anybody but me.
Well, thank you for that. Because I tell caregivers to do that too.
That's what I'm doing. I'm doing it for me.
I'm joined by Beth Allen Kellum, a medical research expert who has been working with hospitals such as Memorial Sloan Kettering, Johns Hopkins, and Mass General over the last 20 years to understand health conditions and new medical breakthroughs. Beth has recently launched an organization providing people living with urinary tract infections, or UTIs, with a new natural supplement called Goodbye UTI as an important alternative to antibiotics. Tell me what you're seeing in the research that you're doing with caregivers during COVID-19.
Well, obviously, it's a very serious time where access to healthcare is limited. And we were worried about what caregivers are doing for their patients. They have to stay at home. They can't get to the doctor, can't get to a hospital, certainly. And so we went out and conducted a survey with 800 women. And it turns out there are about 18 million caregivers who are taking care of someone who has had a urinary tract infection in the past year. And even more worrisome is that about 42% of these, almost half of them, have had more than 3 in a year.
Wow.
Now, why is that a concern? Well, because if they get continuous urinary tract infections, they're very vulnerable to one of two things. A condition we call delirium, where all of a sudden, and it's a sudden onset, they start having hallucinations and can't communicate, and people mistake it for dementia. Or the other thing that might happen if they're getting these UTIs is they might develop a kidney infection. So they end up in the hospital. In fact, 23,000 people actually die every year, mostly in the older age group, of kidney infections.
Can you tell me more about how this simple healthcare condition has become such a threat to our elder loved ones?
Yes, well, as everybody probably knows, in the olden days, when you got a urinary tract infection, you could go to the doctor, they'd take a little urine culture, and right away, they would prescribe antibiotics. The problem's been that they've overprescribed these antibiotics over the past few years, decades actually. And what's happened is these bacteria have learned how to hide and protect themselves from antibiotics. So the moment they leave your system after taking a course, they're hiding there and they begin to regroup and take over your system again.
So the old-fashioned call to the doctor, get the antibiotics prescription is not the answer anymore.
No, especially not for the older segment, because what they found out is in the olden days, again, they thought, well, for the elderly, we'll just prescribe long-term low-dose antibiotics and they can take those every day and avoid this problem. Well, turns out because they're so immunologically challenged, the symptoms of the antibiotics were hurting them more than the actual cure for the UTI. So believe it or not, Gary, doctors are now prohibited from prescribing long-term antibiotics.
What can caregivers do?
So antibiotics, new ones are not on the horizon. What is on the horizon in the community is natural alternatives, natural supplements. And one of the most tested and safe and effective, there have been clinical trials over in Europe on this, is called D-mannose. And D-mannose handles 80% of all urinary tract infections. It addresses the E. coli bacteria. And it works very easily. A simple scoop in a glass of water, coffee, or even their favorite, smoothie or whatever they like to take every morning, and it just completely flushes within 30 minutes through their bladder and washes out with their urine. I personally had this problem over several years, and then I did research online because that's my profession and found, again, these 18 million women out there who are taking care of someone who have them, and I'm a senior as well as everybody else. So I did the research. I found that this was the product that everybody is most satisfied with as an alternative to antibiotics. And it's interesting, it's men, women, and children that it works for. But all of them are saying it's working and they want to stock up. So the one tip I would say for everybody is keep it handy on your shelf because you never know when you might need it. Keep a good close eye on your patient or loved one. And when you see the signs of it, start with frequent doses. Then you can ratchet back to just 1 or 2 times a day. It's very simple.
Beth, what's the one most important piece of advice you'd like to share with family caregivers?
Talk to other people, other caregivers. We're all online. We're on Facebook groups. Everybody's sharing what they're seeing out there. And it's a very common thing to see this delirium. It's the new thing that we have to worry about.
Don't ignore the symptoms.
Don't ignore the symptoms, right.
Lance, what is the one most important piece of advice you'd like to share with family caregivers?
Great question, Gary. And I will just say, as I've consistently said over the years, it absolutely involves planning ahead. Far too many families don't take the time to put together the right legal documents to help support their care efforts. This is a great time to reach out to those legal service developers. And like I said, they're all working. So this is a wonderful opportunity for families to maybe go back, either create a plan, reevaluate their plan. But that would be my single most important thing, Gary, involves having those conversations now. You and I both know what impact that could have long term.